Hello YouTube, it's Kirks here, and now we are going to talk about the newest tier list for WildRift, and we'll start with the Baron lane. First off, in this video we'll be having some skin codes hidden, so best of luck getting these. And now, let's talk about the picks. First off, in the Baron lane we still have Fiora as the best possible pick available, however there are a few other gold alternatives. You can pretty much pick any of these champions and have very high success without having to worry about too much. For example, Gwen is a hyper scaler, Renekton is a bully but struggles to carry games, Jax is a side lane demon, and all these champions have different purposes for different games. However, if we go lower into the tier list, for example into the A tier, we start to struggle a tiny bit. So you see, Vladimir after all the changes doesn't really perform too well in the Baron lane because he used to be a very CDR hungry champion, but nowadays he needs to have this magic pen and full damage, but that doesn't really work on the Baron lane. The people there just go for Merc Treads and your life is absolutely horrible. If there's one pick that we can probably debate on or debate about, it's probably going to be Gragas being a very good blind pick. All the other picks below are really not doing too well in the meta, and you rarely see them functioning well outside of very specific matchups or them just being spoon-fed on cooldown. If you want to play a tank in the top lane or the Baron lane, then well, you must go for Volibear. This champion's base damage is insane, his tankiness is insane, and he is absolutely insane at dealing with all the other meta champions in top lane. He can also dive very easily, similar to a Tryndamere, by just disabling the tower, whereas Tryndamere has to face tank everything with his ultimate. And the other picks, for example in the S tier, are either very strong when it comes to just diffusing the lane, for example Garen, or making it very difficult for the enemy to breathe on the map with, for example, Ornn. And Shen is always a champion you have to have on your radar, because this champion can always be the difference maker with this ability to just teleport around the map and make sure the life is very gruesome for the enemy's team. As per usual, for the top lane, it's very much important that you pick a champion in a good matchup that can secure the first baby Skarner. This actual little scorpion is the most broken thing you've ever seen in top lane. This little thing can single-handedly carry your entire early game without anything you have to do because it's simply so unbelievably unbalanced. So for your information, this thing spawns at 2 minutes, so keep that in mind and enjoy your time in the Baron lane. And now we're moving over to the mid lane. We did a little bit of cleaning up here and we have Vladimir as the best possible mage you can pick up. He's directly contested with other champions like for example Aurelion Sol and Twisted Fate. Other champions such as Syndra, Annie, Zoe or Lux simply cannot really compete with the power level these champions have and can rarely carry games in direct comparison to these peers. However, they are still very strong in their own category and still a very powerful pick within the S tier. If you now take a look into the A tier, you start having a lot of problems. For example, champions that take way too long to scale. You have Ziggs after the changes, you have Orianna, Veigar, Vex. All these champions, they simply take too long to become relevant and can rarely achieve something in direct comparison to, for example, the S tier. In the B tier, you have champions that, can't really do anything in at best neutralizer picks, for example Morgana, but they're not really carry champions. They're more like champions that sit back and try to be stable for their team, but they're not really the most influential champions, they're more like the supportive champions. Outside of Brand, he's just a crazy maniac. For the assassin tier, here we have a few things we need to talk about. First off, we have Kassadin as the highest assassin here because he deals too much damage too fast. The other champions in the S tier, we have Akali, Ahri, Pyke, Echo and Fizz. So why do we have Pyke here? Pyke usually performs very well into mages because he's too tanky and can just stab them to death with his high base damage, and he can also influence the entire map basically like a better Zed. So what for example about Echo? Echo recently received a buff on his first ability and other things, making him a lot better when it comes to wave clear, allowing him to actually scale. However, his best position is still the jungle department. And as for the A tier, champions here are way too flippy or just not very good in the meta. You can probably say that Zed is the by far best champion out of all of these, but still really not the best champions, and if you want to win the most consistently, you are better off just picking Kassadin in every game, Vladimir, Aurelion Sol and Twisted Fate. Now let's talk about the other tier. Here we have a few choices. Okay, the best champion still is going to be Jace. Very powerful, a lane bully, just one-shots people on cooldown. Other champions like Yone is very good into these mages. You have Draven as the most powerful annoying lane bully. You have Corki as a good neutralizer pick. Yasuo, the bane of every single champion that recently got buffed as well. So yeah, you have a big problem with that one. And other champions that scale very well, like for example Tristana or Teemo into the later stages of the game, who depending on how he plays can be very scary to to deal with as well. And simply lane dominant champions like, for example, we have Irelia and Lucian. In the A tier we have champions that are less lane dominant outside of Akshan, but I think for Akshan you can make even an argument that Akshan can be put into S tier with the changes to Blade of the Rune King and Terminus, making him more of a champion than he was before. And in the B tier you rather stay away from these because they don't really do anything outside of certain matchups, or just don't do anything in the first place. For example, you can make the argument that you can pick Graves and level 1 push as fast as possible to then just invade the enemy buff in a duo scenario. That is a very cheesy thing to do, but it works most of the times due to the fact that you're playing solo queue. For the jungle we have a few changes, but a few things stay the same as per usual, and that is Lee Sin being the best champion if you have the proper mechanics. Other than this, we have a lot of new faces and a lot of old faces in the S tier, so let's talk about them for a second. Lilia and Rengar are both in the S tier now, being as powerful as they are. They are really crazy, and even Yone is now in the S tier as well. But why these champions? Lilia just got buffed, Rengar really benefits from the one-shot meta and a buffed Infinity Edge, and Yone is just a crazy solo queue pick that allows you to power farm and kill people on repeat. If there are a few champions that might not be S tier material but really depend on the context, it's probably Kindred after all the nerfs and Nyla. However, given on the context, it's still possible to play these champions and they're very powerful. But if there's one champion, simply one that is probably the most broken and annoying champion to deal with, it is going to be Xin Zhao. This one is the most annoying champion to face with the highest damage output that you can dish out in the most consistent way because it doesn't require any skill. It's simply too easy and too powerful. As for champions in the A tier, they basically do everything worse than champions in the S tier, with maybe the exception of Echo. You can also say that maybe Gwen can be put a little bit higher, but Gwen is too flippy for my take and I really do not like her compared to, for example, Evelynn. And in the B tier, you have champions you rather stay away from because they don't really do anything in a consistent manner and they really deal too little damage outside, for example, hyper late game Graves and hyper late game champions, but they usually don't even get to that point, nor do they have the abilities to influence teamfights early enough to make a difference. For the tank tier, we have Volibear here as well as the probably best champion you can pick in the jungle. Other than this, we have Shen with the global pressure, Jarvan with the good gank setup, Nunu being annoying in objective control and just going for ganks, Nautilus being able to be flexed into tank and carry as well, so these are very good choices you can go for. Sion is on the weaker side and probably the weakest tank jungle you can go for, so you'd probably rather go for a carry Sion build in the jungle or you just don't play Sion at all. And for Warwick is a lot of damage, but other than this, he doesn't really provide anything. So first off, he can also be listed in the carry tier and he would at best be A tier there, so don't worry about it. But if you want the probably best champions for the tank tier, just go for the S tier or the provided pick of the patch. Now let's talk about AD carries. We have Varus as the best pick still, closely followed by a perfectly played Caitlyn, a perfectly played Zarya, and then we have to talk about other picks. Tristana, not a champion until level 5. Draven probably needs a duo similar to the Samira, but you can have any engaged support and it still works beautifully. You can even pair a Draven with a Yuumi and you absolutely go crazy because Yuumi is unbalanced still. And the victims of this patch have been Ezreal, and Lucian. These champions have suffered a lot throughout the changes to Kraken, so they are weaker than before, but you still have an option to dominate laning phase simply due to the nature of these champions. Ezreal also has a new build that you need to go for because otherwise you probably lack damage, because the old build doesn't work as well anymore because it's League of One Shot, not League of Sustained Poke. So if you want to stomp lane, go for Caitlyn, Samira or Draven. If you want to diffuse lane, you go for Ezreal or Zarya. If you want to scale, you go for Kai'Sa and for Tristana. And if I forgot anything, did I forget anything? I don't think so. Oh yeah, Lucian. If you want to dominate lane, also go for Lucian. Now let's talk about the A tier picks. We have a lot of champions here that either are way weaker than the counterparts in the S tier, or simply don't do anything in the current meta or take too many resources or specific setups. So for example, you can make an exception and say Corki is a very good lane diffuser, so you can still put him into S tier, but all the other champions require very specific setups and require way too long compared to their peers to be very powerful. And for the champions in the B tier, they're strictly kind of useless unless they have a Lulu. So yeah, keep that in mind. These are Lulu champions and they only get nerfed or touched because they're primarily paired with Lulus on the Chinese server, and the Chinese server only has 3 bans. So keep that in mind. They usually don't ban Lulu to a high degree. If you check the website of them, you see that the Lulu ban rate isn't high, but the Yuumi ban rate, because most of the time they ban junglers because jungle has the most broken champions. Now let's talk about the mages. The best mages in the bot lane is still going to be Mr. Ziggs. Other than this, you have Lux and Seraphine, and after this you already have to go way lower. So the weaker champions in the ST are going to be Veigar, Syndra, Karma, you have weaker Zoe, and then Orianna. The only good things about Syndra and Karma is the beautiful setup, and the same applies to Zoe, but it's very high risk. Lux and Seraphine are very high distance champions with very high base damage, so it's a very different story. In the A tier you have champions that require certain setups or simply do not do enough in the current meta, so you rather stay away from them. I always keep on saying Leona and Morgana because it's a very good combo, but yeah, you have to keep that in mind. Now let's talk about the support champions. The best engaged champion is going to be, well, who would have guessed, Nautilus, the by far best champion you can ever think of. For the other champions, you still have very good selections in the S tier. All of these champions are very good building full tank or some kind of AP mix with Rakan, but yeah, all of these champions relentlessly broken, especially if you run Hex Flash. In the A tier, these are more competitive picks, I would stay away from them in solo queue, and in the B tier, I don't even know what you ever play these champions unless you really enjoy them. For the Protect tier, you still have Janna as the best pick, providing the most security and most annoyances that you can possibly imagine, and other than this you have Lulu, Soraka, Yuumi and Braum. Braum is probably the most underrated champion, but it's very good into all-in and in League of One-Shot, because if you can deny projectiles and provide CC on top, you make it very difficult for your team to be one-shot first and your team to be the first one that actually one-shots the enemy. In the A tier, all of these champions are substantially weaker than, for example, the S tier, but I think that you can maybe make an exception with Nami and Seraphine, but I believe that all the champions in the S tier are a tiny bit better than these two, and the other champions like Shen, Nasus, and Sona are way weaker. Unless we get into hyper late game, then Sona is super annoying because Sona provides you with a lot of disengage with the ulti and a lot of sustain and shielding. And Morgana, I still don't know why would anyone play Morgana in the support position, because she really doesn't provide much. As for the carry tier, we have Pyke as the best selection, the most proactive and most annoying support you can think of, and the alternatives here are Karma, Ashe, Lux, and obviously Senna. So for Senna, you will go full damage with Essence Reaver and IE, there's no mercy, you just go full all in. For Lux, you go full AP as per usual. For Karma, you can go full AP, or for the Demigod build with Harmonic Echo, depending on how the game is playing out. For Ashe, you're most likely a setup champion, so I would not play this champion unless you're in duo, so keep that one in mind, similar to, for example, Senna. In the A tier, your champions provide too little for what you have to do to make them worth, or so you simply don't die or don't deal enough damage. You can pick any of these reasons if you want to. And that is basically the video for today. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe, and comment to make sure the algorithm is popping off, and we'll see each other for more Rift Guides content very soon in a new video. So, see you soon.